Revelation 12:11 says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And it says, I like to leave out this part. And they loved not their lives unto death. That I didn't love my life so much that I wasn't willing to go for him. And so that part, I haven't hit that part yet. My story is actually like the death part was first, and then the God is amazing part is second. And so whatever that third part is going to look like, I'm okay with that. I think that's part of what God is doing in my heart, in my mind. I'm just going to be okay with whatever comes next. So share my testimony. It's so interesting because it's actually not about me. It's about a God who loved me so much and waited for me. We just sang about waiting. We're waiting here for God. And sometimes I've been waiting for God to move and waiting for God to do whatever God wants to do. But I have a God who waited for me. I could start my story with an older man who was already married and a young woman. She was 19, who bravely went to college. I think she was the first person in her family to go to college. So excited. And she met that older man. And at 19, she got pregnant. And her doctor strongly recommended that she terminate that pregnancy. And she adamantly said, no way, I'm going to have this baby. And at 6 weeks old, I think I was 6 weeks old when she almost bled out and died, wound up back in the hospital. They stayed together. They moved to Winnipeg. I was born in Mississauga. They moved to Winnipeg and they rented a little house from a couple who loved Jesus. No one in their family talked about God, cared about religion, they had no grid for that at all, but they had these landlords who loved Jesus and would invite them over, would invite them to their home for dinner in this new city where they knew nobody. And within a year, they had given their lives to the Lord and wanted something different for their family, for their kids. They started having more children. They started bringing me to church. There was fun church potlucks and just this beautiful, amazing community that loved on us. And I have 3 younger brothers, and I became a very over-responsible young woman. I was a little girl who was so insecure and full of fear and shame. From some of my earliest memories are of feeling shame. I looked for love and belonging and attention from a pretty young age from boys. That was a great place to get some attention. And I experienced from a very young age deep, deep loneliness and no friendship. I remember years of praying with my mom that God would bring me a friend, that I would have a friend. I would tell you about, let's not, sorry, stop. Are you timing me, John? Because I did something else. Restart, start. Okay. So if I was going to tell you my full story, I would tell you about answered prayer and getting a friend, but I wouldn't tell you about some of the sleepovers and some of the things that happened. I wouldn't tell you about, I probably, at this point, maybe I would go into the bulimia and I would go into some of the rebellious things that I did, just to try to ease some of that pain inside of me. I wouldn't have known how to explain to you shame and what that felt like or where it came from. I could now. I could go into great detail about shame and where it comes from and lack of trust. But back then I couldn't put any words to any of this. And so I really didn't talk about anything with anybody. Lots of people tried. That beautiful little church, they tried really hard. They paired me with a wonderful woman who I would go to her house on a regular basis, and she tried to be a mentor to me. And I just thought her son was the cutest thing on the face of the earth. And so I was really happy to go to her house. In my early teens, that prayer was answered, and I got an 18-month friendship that was so deep with an amazing young woman. She was only a year older than me, and yet she knew God in a way that I had never understood God. And she brought me to like youth group and youth events, and we experienced the power of God at these youth events in a way that I had never seen. Healings and learning or being gifted a prayer language from God, of just being just all of a sudden praying in tongues and not really knowing what that was about or what it meant. But it was like, for me, it was between me and God, this beautiful prayer language that I had. I experienced God's power and just this real, true power. And then I moved to Ottawa. And I was again alone and isolated and lost, and looked immediately to the attention of boys where I could get, have immediate friends or companionship, I guess you'd call it, because the girls were mean and they did not like me. They did not want me there because I came in the middle of the school year. And when you're new at a school, at a very small school, you get a lot of attention from boys, and that doesn't go over well with the girls. So friendship was extremely hard, and I just turned to guys. I believed in the Bible and I believed in God's power, but I really truly had no understanding of how to walk that out. But I did know that I could make friends at church, so I picked a big church near my house and deeply embedded myself in the youth group. And yet just something didn't quite click for me. And I met another guy. He was a pastor's kid. That should have been safe. But we were always warned about the pastor's kid. I just didn't listen. And then I actually remember making the decision that I'm going to go sleep with my boyfriend now. And a friend and I went and got birth control from our doctor. And like I had it all planned out. Because I was just done, and I was going to rebel against my parents, and this didn't work, and I was tired of not being trusted, and things digressed pretty quickly in our relationship. And so that boy was John. I was 17, he was 19, and he was already a handful of trouble. That I didn't know about at first, but quickly started to find out. People started to tell me things. Girls started to tell me things. People started to tell me things, and it didn't matter. I didn't listen. I just kept going. And within a very short period of time, I was drinking too much. There's nights I don't remember. Really, truly choosing over and over again a man who didn't treat me well. Being lied to and cheated on and abandoned, being pregnant at 20, and really, truly wanting to be a really good mom. That had been embedded in me. I'll have this baby and I'll be a really good mom. And that probably kept me from going further down the partying path. I actually would plan my party times. I gotta get a babysitter. Do I have to work tomorrow? But I had that same thing where, like, if I started drinking, I would drink more than I wanted to, which is the same as some of you. My drinking looked a little different because if I didn't want to, I wasn't going to. And if I had to work in the morning, I was probably not going to drink that much. But just so many nights of just drinking so much more than I wanted to. Really ugly stories. So pregnant and 100% supported by our family and so many friends. I was so well surrounded, and yet I was hiding, and there was so much shame that things could be like this. I was just living, as things got worse, we just lived this double life. And I just hid everything. There was friends who cut me out of their life because they just couldn't understand how I could keep going back to this guy. And I didn't understand how I could keep going back to this guy either. Why would I keep letting him come back? And I did. And I just couldn't understand it. There was no making sense of it. And, even to the point of like on our wedding day, which was quickly planned within a month, I did get an engagement ring at one point. I think it was after a bender. He came home with this engagement ring and, oh, wow, we're going to get engaged. And I don't remember how long I had it before circumstances determined that we needed to get married. And so, quick, let's plan a wedding. Let's just go down to the justice of the peace. And then it morphed into, well, let's actually have an actual wedding. And we were supported. And so we're going to get married. And here we are getting married. And I picked him up on the morning of our wedding from a phone booth downtown at 4:30 in the morning, the day of our wedding. And walked down that aisle. So I married a full-blown alcoholic drug addict. And I continued to try to hide and desperately trying to fix him, desperately trying to make sense of it all. I had been given this miracle job on Parliament Hill. It was just such a miracle. And we got this miracle house. Just such an unbelievable piece. And all these things happened pretty much in a very short period of time. We got married and then things drastically got worse. And then I got this job on the Hill and we got a house and we were going to move into this house and live happily ever after. But just continued to find out heartbreaking things and taking him back time and time again. And in the midst of all of that, there was for me this ever-present love of God that I just didn't know how to walk out. Like I just didn't know how to let it change me. But I always knew I wasn't alone. And I had this moment alone on my bed where just the presence of God was just so real. And then I'm going to read Psalm 40, verse 2, because this just defines like how quickly things, or not quickly, but how things shifted for me. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet upon a rock. He gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, who does not look to the proud, to those who turn aside to false gods. Many, Lord my God, are the wonders you have done, the things you planned for us. None can compare with you. Were I to speak and tell of your deeds, there would be too many to declare. And that's the verse that was on my heart as I was like trying to prepare, like, what am I going to say? How do I share my testimony in 20 minutes? And the details aren't important because it's really just God. It's God that was so important. It's God that made the difference. There was this like accelerated, there was me leaving and then him winding up at rehab and then eventually coming home, and it feels accelerated, but at the time it didn't. So it's like a couple of years where all of this stuff happened and just so many people coming alongside. There was me starting to tell people what was really going on. And, even before I left for the last time, going to recovery meetings, going to Al-Anon, going to Codependence Anonymous, knowing that there was some kind of solution there that felt safer for me to approach versus, I had tried going to church a few times and that just didn't feel like a place where I belonged at all. I remember being swarmed by like the welcoming committee in one church and feeling pinned against the wall and just wanting to like disappear and please don't see me. If you knew what was going on in my house, you wouldn't want me here. If you knew the things that I had done, you wouldn't want me here. So he came out of rehab, he came home. Our kids were 9 and 7 by that point. And there was many years of us going to open AA meetings, him doing his own recovery thing, healing retreats, marriage retreats, and a very patient pastor, and many wonderful mentors and people who spoke life into our lives. The biggest thing that I would want to go into great detail about, which I have, and I've actually given sermons about and talked about, and I'm super passionate about, was forgiveness. It's such a big part of my journey. What are you guys looking at? Died? Oh, no. That's, look at that one. I was like, there's something happening. So forgiveness was just such a big part of my healing. And I actually remember a moment of knowing I tell all these stories and you tell me, wow, you were so strong. I can't believe you went through all that. How strong you are. And knowing that I needed to forgive. I needed to forgive because as I would tell the stories, like the adrenaline, like I could just feel it in my body. Like, I mean, I can still do it. When I talk about some of the stories, it'll happen. It comes back, right? You feel that like it just happened yesterday. And some of it, when I really get going and people are like, wow, this is like a movie. And I'm like, I know, but it was my life. There was a switch for me of knowing that the way that I was telling this, I actually wasn't okay. I'm telling this because I'm hurt. I'm telling this because I'm so lost and lonely and angry and I feel so isolated and alone and I don't know what to do with it. And I remember God saying, are you going to forgive? Are you going to forgive? Because if you don't, I actually had a picture of what that would look like. I could see the bitterness dripping off the tongue of older women who were so hurt and so angry. And I saw what it did to them. I could see it on their faces, and I knew I didn't want that. And then God said, you have to let it go. Are you going to let it go? Are you going to forgive? And I remember making an actual choice to forgive. Forgiveness is very different than amends, making what the wrongs that I had done, like actually doing through my 12-step process, that endeavor to make right the harms that I had caused, to actually admit that I caused harms, which is so difficult for a codependent, an Al-Anon, the family of an addict, the wife of an addict. We didn't do the wrong. You did. That's why you go to rehab. And yet, over time, the clarity around the harm that I caused and how I used him for my own selfish needs, how I actually needed him to come back. I needed to take care of him. I needed the drama, the chaos, I remember realizing, like, when I left him, the final time, which was I packed everything up and made a very dramatic pronouncement of leaving. Like, it was so final. I knew, and I remember telling a friend, I will not get with someone else. I will not be with someone else because I will pick the same thing. I'm not doing that. I will be alone for a very long time until God tells me something different. I knew that there was just something broken in my thinking that was out of my control, that I just couldn't make a healthy decision or a healthy choice around relationships. I wanted change and freedom. And so for me, that came through forgiveness, which in some of my relationships has not meant having that person close again. That's not possible for me. That wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't be healthy. The reason that was different with John is because he's got his own story, and God did a whole bunch of things over there. And he pursued God way harder than he pursued me. Pursuing me and wanting me to trust him and wanting me to know the healing that was going on in his life was actually secondary to him than his actual healing, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but it was a dramatic shift from the earlier times in our relationship where he would convince me that it was going to be different, that he would convince me that things were going to change, that he was going to change. He was changing, had changed, and then I grew to trust him, and then I was able to forgive him. But I've had other people that I had to forgive even without them being around or wanting my forgiveness. The restoration of our marriage was very slow. If I had time, I would tell you all about Jericho Road and how Jericho Road came into our lives and how I'm working full time and serving at Jericho Road. And oh my goodness, what that did for me and in me. I would talk to you about our son being diagnosed with a chronic health condition. Epilepsy came into our lives when he was 16. So we were pretty newly sober, about 5 years into healing and into recovery. That came into our lives. I would tell you more about agreeing to facilitate 12-step groups that I felt completely incapable of doing, being asked to step in obedience into ways of serving that felt way outside of my ability or understanding. But the miracle of the community that had come around us and just being asked to do the next little right thing and being obedient in that, despite I think I had a lot of rough edges. And I just think of the grace of the people that were around us and their love and tolerance, and their faithfulness, and how grateful I am for that. I did want to tell you in great detail about a vision that John had in the very early years about a building, a 24/7 prayer and healing and ministry building. And I was like, you're crazy. Don't talk to me about this. What are you even talking about? Like, this is insane. And kind of praying about it together so long ago and putting it aside, right? Just almost, I remember he even drew a picture of what he saw in his vision and what it would look like. And he was so passionate and I was just so fearful and like, oh my goodness, like, you're insane. Don't talk to me about your dreams. Like, and putting it away and just putting it away and like knowing that we just needed to do what was in front of us. There was a word spoken of a Bible verse that a friend sent me at one point. We weren't really even doing much at the time. And I got this email from a beautiful woman and she said, God, I've been praying for you guys. You guys are pastors. You're pastoring. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? You're pastoring people. You're shepherding people. And that was nowhere on our radar at that point in time. And the verse that she sent me, or the passage that she sent me, was Colossians 1, verses 9 to 15. For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father, who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. And I remember going back when it started to come on our radar that we were going to start a church, and I felt so much fear when we started talking about that. And then I remember going back to this email that I had saved from so many years before and rereading her words, and my faith being strengthened through what she had emailed me many, many years before. We then went through kind of like a dragon's den of church planting and a pretty intentional period of like, just, okay, God, is this what you're asking us to do? I think that was around 2012, 2013. We connected with a church planting organization and had people affirm and say, yes, we actually really think that you're called to do this. Like we believe, we don't understand you. You aren't like anybody else that we have ever encountered. Your story is wow. And also you're not like other pastors. But we do see that God has called you to do this. And so we did. It was long and slow, and there was lots of bumps and hurdles and tears, mostly on my part, but lots on his part too. And then Union City Church was birthed, and quickly after we started and I'm not the visionary. I'm not the one who comes up with ideas. I'm usually quite reluctant, and I like to find all the holes and how things can go wrong. But I love to listen, and I really want to be helpful. That was actually part of what went awry in my codependency, is I do want to be helpful. And so all of this like untreated adrenaline, codependency, I dug deeper in 2019 after my job ended. I had a bit of a breakdown and a burnout, and it was truly due to my untreated codependency and what I call adrenaline addiction, which I would go into greater detail and explain to you if you felt like being here all day. I worked the 12 steps and truly came to see that the way that I was living was very dangerous, actually. To have that going on in my mind, it's very dangerous. Suicidal ideation, that wouldn't be the first time in my life that I had experienced it. I can pinpoint other times when I was younger, but out of my untreated disease or mental obsession, spiritual malady takes me to a place that's very dark. And so I needed to do a very intentional healing journey. So I dug deep into the 12 steps in 2020 and experienced the power of truly living recovery and not just being around recovery, which is how I had spent most of the first 10 years of 15 years of our journey. I was able to identify some deep fears and shame, and God really removed a lot of that fear. There was a miracle of finding this space and me recognizing that I don't need to try to keep a lid on what goes on, that actually God's in charge, that he's going to dream big, and he's actually going to seek God and godly counsel for his big dreams. And I get to walk alongside, and I don't have to worry about all the little details that could go wrong or how the bills are going to be paid or all these different things. At one point he said, Vikki, like the things that I'm doing now, people don't go to jail for. So the things that I did before, yes, I could go to jail, but these things, no. So maybe we'll make some missteps, but this is different. And so we have a beautiful miracle of finding this space, and really, truly, it has often felt to me like that vision from so long ago, that it really did come to fruition in a way which spoke to me about me allowing dreams to be in me, allowing them to come to the surface and not having to sort it out and figure it all out, and not being the person who always says like, oh, well, it won't work because of this or it won't work because of that. I get to leave it with God. I get to leave it with God, and he'll sort it out. And his timeline is so different. I love that we sang like that we're waiting here for God, because this is like waiting isn't a horrible thing. Like, I don't know what he's going to do, but I'm going to wait for him to do the next thing. So right now I'm waiting for my ordination papers to come in the mail. I didn't ever dream that I would be married to a pastor, never dreamed that I would be a pastor myself. I fully don't understand why I felt like I needed that, but I did feel like it was the next right step, that God was asking me to seek my ordination and to continue serving God's people, and really to continue to grow in my understanding of the holiness of God, and that it's not about what I can do for him, but it's about God wanting to be with me and about him making it so that I can be with other people in a really healthy way. And so the words that someone else's words came to mind for me about what we do here, why we do this. This is the current vehicle for God's work. This is the current tool for the work that God wants to do in me, in John, and through us, and in others. And so here we are bridge building. And that's always what Union City Church has been. We said a tagline of igniting hope and restoring freedom. And it was really about bridge building. So it was like, here's this 9-month rehab that John was running. And how do we take this into like a lifetime of community? Like, how do we walk this out outside of just the 9 months of this rehab? And that was like, that's what church community felt. It was bridge building between AA and God, bridge building from hopelessness to faith and trust, bridge building from isolation to community, and from shame to security. And I feel like part of this, well, what we've seen is this next season for us is coming alongside others as they walk out the dreams that God is giving them. And so that's happened in a big, beautiful way with SOS, and Gerald was already doing something, and we said, how can we come alongside? Like, what do you need? We don't have time for good ideas. We have God ideas that we're walking out, and many people have good ideas. If you want good ideas, people will give you good ideas all day long. But what you need for your life is God's idea. What has God called you to? And sometimes we sit in that for a little while, and we continue to seek him and to pray. And, maybe hopefully for you, it doesn't take 15 years for God's big dream to come to reality. But I just want to pray for you that God, would every person in this room know that they are a vehicle. They are like a tool. They are like a treasure, that you place that treasure in them so that you can have relationship with them, that you will work in them and through them to bring right relationships around them, and so that they can have an impact in the world in whatever, it could be. Some of us are going to think it's really small what God's going to do. There's no small thing in God's kingdom. There's no small idea that came from God. It's all his, and it all has impact, and it all has value. And so I just pray for each person here, God, that they would know that this life that you have given them belongs to you, and that you long for nothing more than living it with them. God, I pray that they would see your image in them, that our failures and our flaws would fall away, and that we would see your image more than we see anything else. Amen.